in itself, but the talent that we've got here today. Here we go. We're live on YouTube. Hello, everybody.
Hello, world.
The backbone of the British and the Irish film industry. Really grateful to have you here. Thank you so much. With having some help with Cook Optics TV, who are distributing our stream for us on Facebook and on YouTube. So hello, everybody, and welcome. The idea I had originally of getting you lot together was especially you in terms of was almost in couples really, because I wanted to get DPs and the gaffers that they'd work with, and so everybody here has got a bit of a connection, which is fantastic, even if you don't remember it. Some of it was very recent, but some of it has been really long-lasting collaborations, which is I think is all really important. We've got some questions. Some questions are starting to come in, I think. Let me just check the box. No, we haven't got any questions just yet, but we're hoping that people will take advantage of that. People who are watching the Zoom webinar, you can if you can drop your questions into the Q&A box, and we'll try and get those answered for you. We'll try and weave that into the conversation. But just to kick off, well, let's introduce everybody first. We've got Danny Cohen BSc, Ben Smithard BSc, and Chloë Thomson BSc. Welcome, 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 welcome. We've got John Attwood, who has recently worked with Chloë. We've got Paul McGeachan, who's a real long-term collaborator with Danny Cohen. We've got Barry Conroy, who's in Dublin, who not too long ago worked with Ben Smithard, and Julian. Well, we've just got Julian. Hello, Julian White. Julian, I did a job with Julian last year, so we've all got a bit of connection. I worked with Barry, and I was just about to work with Paul just before we were shut down. So there's the links for you. Oh, crumbs! I've got far too much information here. Let's do a question. Screw it. Let's do a question. So let's. How about this? This is for everybody, DOPs and for gaffers. If you're working together for the very first time, you know, and that's what sort of discussions do you try to have, and how do you get yourselves in sync with a brand new DP or gaffer? Julian.
My thing sometimes is I ask what they don't like, actually, rather than what they do like, just to eliminate stuff. So, you know, gels and diffusion and things like that, because obviously those are the taste things that people are quite particular about. And then also just try and find, not personal stuff, but just try and find connections, maybe in culture, politics, whatever, that you can then start building upon. So it's like any relationship, I guess. You just find things that maybe you do that trigger things, I guess. And it's just then working through, talking about films and music, all different things. So more of a personal level, really.
I mean, we've all, I think everybody's here. Most people have had really long collaborations with people, but also, you know, if you travel a fair amount, and Ben, you've traveled a fair amount in terms of working in various countries in the world, but do you have a regular gaffer, or is it a fairly constant having to work with local people and starting those relationships?
Abroad, it's always somebody new, always. I mean, I try because my kids, they're getting older now, but when they were young, I didn't want to go away and do long films. So really, everything abroad's always been commercial. So it's always been somebody new, and always, you know, some commercials you don't need it, you just do it available light, and then some you just really lean on them, and sometimes you meet some great ones. Trust me, all around the world. It could be anywhere, Argentina or China or Hong Kong or wherever, really. And sometimes you just don't quite get on that wavelength that quickly. But it's tricky on a commercial because you'd be maybe a 3-day shoot or 4-day shoot, whatever. On films, you always I mean, the first film I did away from home for any length of time was in India, and because I knew a DP who I'd known for 25 years. So I asked him his advice, and he said, don't bring, they gave me an opportunity. They asked me if I wanted to take a gaffer, and he said, don't take a gaffer to India, because there's like 40 different Hindi languages, and it's really tricky, and also the crews are really big, and so I was just very lucky that I found a gaffer in India that was was just fantastic. I mean, he really was good. And then 2 years later I did another film in India. So and they just, you know, I said to him, I was just interested about, you know, on the first film, how many electricians do you have generally on a day-to-day basis? He said, always have 50. Always have 50. And so I said, we've got a few quite big sequences in this film, quite a few big night scenes. I said, what happens when it gets a bit bigger? And he said, well, we just have 100. He doesn't mess around. There was always been 3 or 4 generators, and you wouldn't see 100 electricians, but you'd know they'd be around. But that was a great experience, I must admit. In the UK, I jump around gaffers because I know so many of them from years ago, and some of them, you know, some people aren't available, and so I just jump around really because it really depends on the job and availability. But I also know a lot, so I can just go, well, I've known him for 20 years from commercials, and we all grew up together or whatever. So that's what happened. And then you know, I do a job with Barry. I'd never done lots of commercials in Ireland, but I'd never done a film. And then I can't remember how we got put together, but it was a match made in heaven.
Oh,
that was one of the first things that was said to me about Ben, was how quick he was in the last picture he'd done. And we were on the recce bus, and the PM had come up to me and said, he's very quick, can you chat to him? So I went down and said, what was the last job you done? He told me about the India and the 50 electricians. I had to go back to the PM and said, he's 50 electricians, we 4. And that was the first conversation we had.
Oh, you made it work.
You should have told the producer.
Well, yeah, you've got a very good 4 though, Barry. That's for sure. Danny and Paul, obviously here in terms of who's present, you've had really the longest collaboration. I mean, do you ever work with other people? I mean, but Danny, you've done stuff abroad, and Paul, you obviously have worked with other people. But how was that? How, you know, have you done stuff abroad together, or how does that work?
I weirdly took Paul to India. He went down very well. He speaks, yeah, he kind of worked out really well. But I think it's the same as if you get people if you work with people who you get on with, then, you know, if you can take them abroad, then it's amazing, because it's like you just slip into the same routine. So it's, you know, it's always a struggle, but it's worth fighting for.
Paul,
how was India for you? You speak about 30 of the 40 Hindu dialects, right?
No,
he does.
When we went there, it wasn't a big sequence we were doing. So maybe, I think I asked for maybe 8 electricians. We had a few 12 bys and a couple of 18Ks. On day 1, we turned up. It was Ramesh, who was at the gaffer. Fantastic man. And I said, how many guys are here? And he said, 26 or 28. and he said, don't worry, that's just what we have. You know, that's the way we do it. And they were, as Ben says, they're fantastic. But again, in India, China, wherever you go, Gaffers and Sparks are exactly the same guys. They're just a different language. For me, you know, it's talk about the same things, they do the same things. The lights are all the same anyway. You know, but nah, it was a good experience in there. Very good indeed.
Slightly different plugs.
Aye, some plugs.
If you get them.
Yeah, some plugs, if you're lucky, yeah. Chloë, have you shot abroad?
Yeah, I did a job in Dominican Republic year before last, and all over, but I guess that was the longest and biggest, and had a lovely, lovely, lovely local crew. Again, there were about 25 sparks and grips. They kind of work at a bit of a hybrid American/British system, which is a bit confusing. So you just have to ask somebody for something and it happens. And a lot of them didn't speak English, so I had to learn a bit of Spanish. But my gaffer was amazing, just, you know, mid-20s, very, very enthusiastic. Everyone's sort of dancing and chilling and just, you know, doing some things that maybe aren't that safe. I don't know, like 20 by 20s to palm trees, but, you know, it worked. It worked, and you've got
to use what you've got. Why not? You know?
Exactly, yeah.
Well, I think the thing is, if you go abroad, you can't enforce your system upon other people because they use it all the time, and it's just you have to sort of monitor it, I guess, a little bit. And I think sometimes taking another gaffer to a foreign location can actually make it worse, because they're trying to, you know, square pegs around holes sometimes.
Yeah, although I did a film in Morocco, and I was lucky enough to take my entire A-camera crew and a gaffer. But then I also had a Moroccan gaffer who spoke no English, and I speak French, so that was helpful. But he ended up being the rigging gaffer, and my gaffer was the gaffer with me. So that actually worked really well, because we were jumping over. But he was working with his crew who didn't speak English, and I was working with my gaffer who did speak English. You know.
Yes. Yeah. It's like an interface, really, is what sometimes we need.
Yeah, which I think, and that's what we did in France, wasn't it? So that it works. John, have you shot abroad?
Yeah, Morocco, most of Europe, Jamaica. Where else? I can't. Isle of Man, or the Isle of Doom. Paul knows what I'm talking about there.
You've done lots of.
There was a period.
Sorry, go on, John.
There was a period in the 90s where everybody, I think, ended up in the Isle of Man, and I couldn't get off the rock, as it goes. I think I ended up doing about 3 feature films there. Every time I tried to come back, I was like, "No, you're staying." And but yeah, so yeah, quite a bit abroad.
John, you've done quite a lot of episodic stuff in the past few years, anyway. How is that for you with DPs? To go back to the question, I guess, is the DPs and rotating on that and them coming in. How do you deal with that, and what's the challenges with that?
It's normally set by the first block and the first DOP, so they've had the most prep, and it's sort of working it from there. And then just being as another DOP comes in for the second block or third block, it's just sort of comforting them and making sure that you keep to those sort of dynamics that you've already chosen for the first block, and not sort of coming off road too much. And I think it's just sort of putting a friendly arm around the next DOP and just saying, you can either do it this way or we can do it that way. That's normally... You
can do it the right way or you can do it your way. Yeah.
I didn't mean it like that at all, honestly. But yeah, something like that.
Oh, my video has just crashed. I'll keep talking. Barry, how is you're currently doing a I don't know if we can talk about it, but you're doing a big TV show for a big American streamer, and you've got different DPs coming in all the time. How is that for you?
It's been okay so far. Well, what we've found is we've been using Q-Take and Pix a lot. So once the new DP was coming in, you were sitting down, you were going through all the footage and that, and just talking about how we'd done it. And I found once you keep your colors, you know, your night colors, your day colors, and keep everything in the broad strokes, you know, generally the showrunner steps in and goes, you can't do that, or you can't do that. But, you know, they're all within the same. Well, once it's been set up, people stick to it to a certain degree and just put their own little touches in. So, and because it's studio and everything is set and ready to go, once you're into shooting, it's just the little touches on the floor that change. Everything else stays generally the same, which helps everything with it.
I mean, talking about streamers, that seems to have taken a lot of TV upscale, hasn't it? And I mean, you haven't shown me anything at all, but I get the impression from you that that the scale of stuff that you're getting to manage now is enormous, and I think that's interesting right now, especially with TV. Is that maybe not domestic TV, but the scale of stuff is becoming more and more like film stuff, right? Or big, it's big budget. It's not indie TV anymore. How is that? Who's done? I mean, what's the biggest thing that you've done recently, John, in terms of TV stuff?
I just sort of September, October, November, that time last year, we just did it was a Warner Brothers stroke Apple TV, and it just grew and grew and grew. It started off and was presented to us as I think 10 half-hour eps, and it was majority of it, I think 75% of it's going to be studio. That just completely changed. Absolutely, it went to 1 hour eps. It changed as it went, completely as it went along, and by the end of it, we had to completely restructure the whole of the lighting crew. So I became almost supervising gaffer with 2 gaffers and 2 teams underneath me, and that was the only way for it to work. So it's a really good question that you brought up there, because I think the whole dynamics of the lighting, and with those huge, great big Netflix, Amazon, Apple, all coming through, are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But the problem, I think, is where they are still structuring them or budgeting those to something that's only having 2 weeks prep, etc. And it's just not working. I think the whole lot has to be, we have to have a rethink of how this works, because there's no way it can be in a conventional way of gaffering it. No, absolutely no way. It wouldn't have worked. We had 6-day turnarounds on some blocks, and it was just madness.
Well, I think the whole environment, well, I mean, apart from the entire globe has changed right now with what's going on, the environment that we were moving into with the streamers and all with lots of money, and the environment for prep and for lighting has changed enormously, hasn't it? And what are people's experiences of that? Ben, what's your experience of how?
It's funny because it's interesting to go back to your conversation with Barry about keeping a consistent look through a television series. And I've done quite a lot of TV, but a lot of TV one-offs, TV films, because they were just like little films for me, and I had complete control. So we were shut down after I'd finished my first block of quite a big TV series. And it's funny what Barry was saying, and luckily I got onto it with a gaffer that I'd worked with on 4 or 5 films, so I knew him really well anyway. And so we had a great crew, great production. It was fantastic. I got everything I needed, but I didn't really have long conversations with a DP that started off, Seamus McGarvey. I didn't have that. We just didn't. You know, I watched his pilot a lot, and it was really good. And I didn't really spend much time talking about how it would look all the way through. So I kind of just did my thing, and he said, just do whatever. And that's tricky actually, because some of the sets that he had done with the gaffer were pre-lit just exactly how I would have done it. So you just leave it, and then you have your own new locations, and some of them, I just wanted to go and be go a little bit crazy, and because I think you have to, otherwise why are you there? And probably went a bit too far on occasions, a bit too much smoke, But that is a learning curve for me, because I don't really do that kind of TV. I mean, not since Spooks, it's a long time ago, where you followed somebody else. But again, I remember following the DP before, he just said, just do it however you want to do it, And I think you really do have to pay attention to what the gaffer's saying sometimes, because, for that kind of thing, because they've been with it, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 months longer than you.
Yeah, it's quite a difficult thing, isn't it? It's finding the edges of something, the parameters that you can work through.
It is, yeah. Difficult. It took me a while to find what those parameters are, because my natural instinct is, like a lot of us, is to experiment.
Yeah.
But you've got to realise it's not your film to experiment on. You've got to, and
do you not find that isn't that frustrating though? Isn't it like a?
It is frustrating.
Can be.
Very much so. Very much so. But the thing is, if you're going to do that kind of thing, you have to buy into it, and
yes,
it's just a learning curve. So, I got it. It just took a while, And my gaffer spent a bit of time looking at me, going, "Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you really sure?" And I went, "Yeah, let's just give it a go. Why not? What's the worst that can happen?"
Yeah. Next train home.
Yeah. Well, we got shut down, so it's okay. I haven't heard anything from the production since, so who knows?
Yeah, that's true. I don't like doing second unit. I've done it once and I found it, it's like you're finishing a meal that somebody else has started cooking, you know. It's
I get that. I've not done second unit either. So not as they ever asked me to, but I know what you mean. But it's a kind of slightly new world. So we have to, I think the Americans have been doing it for a long time, these big TV series. And I guess they know exactly how to do it. It would be easier starting it off, and it would be easier doing the whole 10 episodes, but I've done that once before, and it's hard work. Really hard work doing the whole season of a TV show. Yeah. Really.
Apologies for that. I fell up my internet fell over, but I'm sure you all were chatting away amiably. Thank you for that. And where did you got up to? Talking about splitting. You sound like you're talking about splitting shows and taking different blocks on. As DPs.
Just maintaining a consistency.
I mean, what? Changing the subject slightly, perhaps a subject that always comes up in terms of getting to relationships and starting to prep for a job is about instinct. And I just wondered if anyone could talk a bit about, so it's obviously intangible, but how do you think instinct works for you in your relationships with your keys, in gaffers and key grips and your camera teams? But how does that, and when you arrive on a location or with a particular job, how does instinct work for you, Chloë?
For me, it's everything. I mean, you know, I'm still at the beginning of my career and I think I do everything by my belly. So I feel like that's what's nice about working with people that you have a relationship with, because there's a shorthand there and because they understand what you mean when you say something slightly ethereal and weird and doesn't necessarily make complete technical sense, you know. It's nice when John be like, oh, do you mean putting that there? And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I meant, but that's not what I said. And I think you just, when I read a script, it's about the emotional reaction to it, and then trying to translate that into the visual. And, you know, sometimes it's quite challenging to be dealing with because I've been mostly working in TV drama the past few years and the schedule's just bonkers in my experience. So, you know, it's difficult to work from your gut and to keep true to that, and at the same time be communicating in a kind of technical, simple, straightforward way. And when someone can just read between the lines and understand what you're talking about and has loads of stuff prepped that you didn't even ask for, it's so wonderful when a gaffer's like, yeah, I put that through the door, or I had that up in the ceiling because I thought you might want it, and you're like, oh, I do, and I didn't know I did, you know. And
I didn't take it away.
Yeah, well, I mean, mostly I ask for everything to be turned off, but I think it's really nice for people on your team to be basically preparing in such a technical way that you can think in the moment from a very sort of introspective, gut feeling way, and they've got something for that, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think a collaboration with somebody, they're the best things, aren't they, when it's intuitive and when it's when you're almost finishing each other's sentences. And and I actually have to say that it has to happen, that has to happen very quickly in all of our situations. We have, because, you know, we've got to get on with it in relatively short time. Even if you do have a good deal of prep, you've got that relationship has got to be established. And I think that's across the board, across the whole crew, you know, with DPs, with directors. And so having that, being able to get on with each other is quite important.
Yeah, and trust each other, that you know,
yes,
that you've employed that person through that thing, and therefore monitoring, but not being too micromanaging, I guess. Thing. Yeah, and I think that instinct, once your instinct, you've used the instinct, and then it's come back to you as good, then you can build upon it, you know. Yeah, it has to bear out, doesn't it? I mean, how you've had long-standing collaborations, Julian, with Harris Zambalukas and with Martin Brewer, and how was that? How did they come about, and then how have they developed? Well, with Harris, I got introduced to him because he didn't have a gaffer at the time and he needed somebody. So we started, and we had very similar, not backgrounds as much, but we'd lived in certain countries which had sort of influenced us and had similar tastes in music and things like that. Martin Rue, I did a film called Control with him, and that sealed our relationship from the moment we started, actually, because it was his first feature, and it was my not first feature, but one of the ones that I really felt part of, I guess, is the thing. With Harris, we just, we've become solid friends, and with Martin as well. And, it's not always easy. It's just, we both have egos, we all have egos, and we have to work through that. But it's been a very nice experience, actually. And I think once you start building that trust between each other, it just gets better and better. And then you're allowed to you have a lot of freedom to do, because they understand, you understand, and you don't have to. It's like any relationship, you trust each other, and you can finish sentences and you go, no, I know he won't need that. And it's really good, actually. It's very nice. It's one of the best things about working on a film, actually, when you have that.
Well, it's the shorthand, isn't it? It makes it all quicker.
Yeah.
Danny, you and Paul have. Sorry, go on. Sorry, go on, Julian.
No. Just you can. It strengthens your. Your confidence builds. Their confidence builds, and therefore you. It's like any structure. Once it has that foundation, you can only just keep building higher and higher, and it's great.
Danny and Paul, you've worked an awful lot together. How is how did that come about, first of all? What was the first show that you did together?
I think the first one was Pierpoint, where I think it was the line producer I was on. I'd already started, and the usual guy I'd been working with wasn't available, so Paul came via the line producer. I think it's people who you click with. I mean, the thing I was going to say about the previous conversation is the importance of the recce bus, even though it's like the most painful moment in any production. But the conversations you have, when you're not sitting down in an office, but actually sort of trekking around and standing in real locations, if it's if it's locations you're looking at, is inevitably the recce bus plays a huge part in it. And how, because it's one of the rare moments when you'll have the gaffer, the rigging gaffer, the operator, everybody who's key, the grip. And I think you get a lot out of just sort of round table conversations where things come up that if you hadn't have been in that situation, it would never have come through.
I mean, we don't get enough, do you feel that you get enough prep time with your gaffers? Everyone, look at that, everyone.
Yeah. I mean, it depends how generous it is. I mean, sometimes, the last few things, I think we had a fair old chunk of prep, and I mean, there's never enough. And I think the problem is that it all kind of ends in a car crash. Just you can have huge amount of prep, but until sets are built or studios are finished. Inevitably it all comes together right at the last minute, and then there's too much to do. Even if you had more prep time, you would never be able to focus in the way that you do towards the end of pre-production.
Yeah, there has to be a point where prep has to stop, and because that's the focal point, isn't it? Because if prep went on, if we had loads of it, it would be sort of endless. You've got to have something to drive towards. Paul, how is that? What's your version of that, Paul?
Can I just jump in there? Because just before I think it's a good point, because I always feel as though the gaffers aren't maybe on a lot of projects that I do, maybe a week or 2 weeks of more prep. They basically always need at least a week, and you can see if they get another week, it actually saves the production money because you're just better organized.
For sure.
And it's why wouldn't you just get them on for an extra week? I always find that they're lacking at least a week on every project.
Well, a big thing for me anyway is locations, because often locations is decided before we turn up, and they're way down the line before electrics turns up, and it's often when you're places of scale, is that you can't make those decisions about scale on your own until you've got an electrician in there. Which, I mean, Paul and I were at that point where we were just looking at locations that have been decided upon, and they were locked in and they were beautiful, and there's sort of there was good reasons why we were there, but they were going to be tricky. And I think that was what was good about the prep time we had. And Paul had come in and it was quite soft. We were doing days here and there. So yeah, it's prep is always good. How's working with Danny for you, Paul? This is your chance.
Well, how long have we got? No.
I'll leave the room.
we've worked together a long time, but it's been good because if you do look at the jobs that we have done, there's been a wide range of jobs, not all big, some of them tiny, no budget stuff, but they've all been very different. And that for me, you've got to change what you do all the time then. If we were rumbling along doing the same kind of jobs, whether they're modern day period, if it was the same thing all the time, I think it would be difficult. But Danny's choices of jobs have made it easy because it's a different challenge almost every time. And there was a while, kind of around about 2012, I think we'd done Les Mis, and then we went straight from that to do This Is England, the TV show, gone from quite reasonable size setups to me and one other guy in a Luton Transit van. You know, it's stuff like that that I think's fantastic. And then we would then go on and do another film after that, you know. But I think the thing for us is for me, it's always been different, which keeps things interesting.
I think jumping around from different scale, different films to TV, promos is, I think you can't just sort of tread water, and I think you constantly have to reinvent how you do things because the scale changes, but the intent, what you're trying to achieve is still, it makes something interesting and visual, and it's like it's like a accordion. It just kind of bigger, smaller. It's kind of irrelevant the scale of it. It's how you employ what you have available.
Have you ever come up against the thing where producers think that a gaffer wouldn't do it because it's too small? I have had that. Anyway, let's not talk about that. Yes, I think that I like to make those choices is in terms of scale, and just because it's about what comes along and it's about the material. But those things, I like to keep my hand in with different scales of things, and it doesn't mean that, like you say, is the intent is still the same. What you're trying to achieve, but you have to be practical and make it fit into the budget. But I love that idea of being able to cross. If you've done some scale, you can do a version of that to achieve something similar, but on a different budget. And so it's all a learning process, isn't it? So you can still apply all the same kind of rules.
Yeah, and also I think, sorry, the bigger films as well can be very stodgy, and they can be a little bit, a juggernaut that's slow to move around. Whereas when you're, doing smaller stuff, it can be much more interesting and exciting and much fresher actually, and keep your brain working. There's a lot, big features can be really slow. There's a lot of VFX, all that kind of stuff, and it can make it a bit turgid, which I think sometimes doing the lower budget stuff quite interesting actually.
It's good to go back and try and work out how to get through problems whenever you don't have a truckload of gear. You have to figure out how did we do this before we had sky panels and everything else, and you go back and jump in and out, and it's brilliant. It's the best way. Keeps you fresh, going back to the basics again.
Yeah.
Barry, you did a project where you had a truck full of gear, but you didn't get any of it off. Is that right?
Which one was that? Wasn't Ben's one?
Was it not the lobster?
Oh yes, Timios. Yeah,
Timios.
Yeah, we shot for about 6 weeks, and we had a truck and a Jenny, and it all went back to when we went down to do the camera tests, and he asked me to bring down some lamps, and I arrived down with a van load of lamps, and it turned out he wanted light bulbs from 10 watt up to 60 watt just for practicals, and that's what we used for the whole shoot was light bulbs. 2 of us in a Luton van. It was a great job in the middle of Kerry in the sunshine. It was brilliant. And it was only then when we done the night exteriors then that we brought lamps out.
But the director doesn't like that sort of stuff, does he? He's not a big fan.
The director doesn't like lights. He doesn't like hair and makeup. That's all done the start of the day, and that's it. He doesn't want anyone else in. There's some logic behind all that. Maybe you could say, I don't know. Interesting.
I think his wish has come true now.
Yeah.
No actors.
Yeah. How did the project with Ben come about? It's the man who invented Christmas. So you how did you mentioned how you how did you get back to? How did you get together on that?
I don't really remember, but I
think it
knew
was Patrick.
Sorry,
I
it would have
think
been
it was Patrick. Yeah.
I mean, I know some of your family members as well. So because I'd worked with JP as quite a lot, but no, I think it was just a line producer, and I love shooting in Dublin. It was one of my favourite experiences of all time, making a film, because it was just, the crew were just amazing, and it was a period film, 1842. So I'd done that period before, and I've done so many of the locations. Danny knows all this, and all the gaffers. You just know those locations inside out in London, because you go there all the time. But you go to Dublin, I'd never really seen inside the buildings, and to shoot in the buildings for London, which it was standing in for, was just amazing. So and the only annoying thing about Barry is that I've never been able to get him ever since. Maybe he doesn't want to work with me, but I've never been able to, ever since then, I've never been able to work with him, because he's always busy. So this is interesting, obviously, how Paul and Danny and Julian and Harris, just stay together all these years, because that's a great relationship. And doing, I know that Danny does this great work where he'll do a big movie and then he'll do a little one, and then and to keep that relationship is quite amazing. I've never been able to do it myself. It's a DP's dream to have that, but it's also good to move. I would never have met Barry if I'd just gone, I have to take my gaffer to Dublin, which wouldn't have worked, but it was just a joy. Dublin was. It was just an absolute joy.
It was a nice job, because it was Christmas, and we were shooting a sort of Christmas-based movie.
Yeah.
Around Christmas, and we had a lovely time on it. It was just a nice little crew, and with tricky locations, but it was good fun. Very good fun.
Great director. Great.
Chloë, have you got somebody apart from John that you've worked with? You said, who have you worked with most, or you said you've had lots of different people?
Most recently, yeah, John. But I guess I've been working all around the world, and also not just in London. So I've got a lovely gaffer called Chris Davis, who I work with in Wales, who I've worked with a couple of times. A lovely gaffer called Sam Alberg, who I haven't worked with for a while, but who did that job in Morocco with me. And otherwise, it's all been people I've only managed to work with once, because I've just been, I've been in Hong Kong or India or Dominican Republic or whatever. So it's, it was really nice, because I met John on Top Boy, and he wasn't my choice. Obviously, I came in as second block DP, and then we got on very well, and I asked him to do adult material with me. And he's got these really, really lovely group of young sparks who just are super quick and really up for it, and very technically able, and have everything off an iPad, which is just really nice when you don't have any time. And we get on, and I think what was nice is adult material had very little time, and we already had a shorthand, so he knew the sort of units I like to use. We were using a lot of LED, a lot of Asteras, and working a lot with available, because I like the look of it. And John's cool with that, and then gives me stuff that I didn't know I wanted. The last minute, I'm like, oh yes, please, and that's
Perfect. He sounds great.
Paul never gives me anything at all. It's a nightmare.
He stands there with the truck behind him with his arms crossed.
Never opens the door. That's the problem. That's the problem number one.
So similarly with DPs and gaffers relationships, the gaffers, how do you like to keep your team together? I mean, obviously, a best boy or rigging gaffer, are there people that you have that are constants to you?
Me personally, I love, I remember DP once saying there was no point having me if you didn't have my best boy. I'd be lost without him.
Well, I
know it was, but no,
I would say that as well.
The crew, the guys behind me, none of us would be where we are without the team that we have behind us. I don't believe anyway.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time you can't, because of the people doing other jobs, but you try and build that core element group of people with desk ops and things like that, and also be prepared to move people around like a football team. If they're not in the best position, then move them somewhere else. I mean, obviously you can't move a desk op to wherever you want, but it's just kind of seeing the best qualities of people, allowing them to do their thing, trusting them trusting you, and it's very valuable. Yes, it's really good, and it's a difficult thing actually as well, I think, to keep going.
Paul, you must have people that have that you've had with you for a long time. Is that true, or do you like to change it out?
No, I don't. No, I've not changed them much. My rigging gaffer now used to be the best boy. He's been with us probably 10, 12 years now. Some of the boys maybe 6 years. So they've been with us for quite a while now. But I mean, guys duck in and out and go and do different jobs. But at the same time, the boys will tell you, we take jobs sometimes just to keep the crew together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, so some jobs happen that you maybe don't want to do. They don't last for a long time. So I thought, well, take that, and it keeps all the boys working, and it keeps the crew kind of in this working at the same place, you know.
Mm.
So yeah, I've had a pretty close gang for a while. Great bunch of lads.
But it is, I think that's one of the hardest things, is staying in sync, because as a DP, you might get 3 or 4 months prep on a job, and that's,
yeah,
it's like, you know, then potentially Paul might jump off to do something that can, you know, fit in that gap before his prep would start. So it's always juggling. It's a really
timing is everything, isn't it?
Yeah, keeping in sync is a nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's we can all agree on that. Now let's just jump back to one of these questions, because these are good. Gaffers, is there a non-traditional route into the industry for a gaffer, or is coming through the ranks still the only way?
I didn't, so I don't. I disagree. Well, I'm the exception probably, but no, I think you just, I don't know. Some of it's luck, and some of it's just what your motivation and all those things. You know, I don't think it's a natural progression necessarily. A lot of, you know, I think that gaffers in a way should become DOPs rather than, you know, camera assistants necessarily. I think that's probably a more logical route. But no, I don't think there's any hard and fast rule, really.
No, I guess it's similar for DPs as well. Is that there's not? I mean, I didn't to go in any way a traditional route. Maybe I should have, but
no, I don't.
maybe that's what's wrong. Anyway,
I think one thing I would say is that you can't teach a gaffer how to be a gaffer. You can't go to film school and learn it. I think you just do it by doing it. So obviously the guys who've come through the crews understand all the nuances of that, and the people, and it's building their crew behind you. You know, that you can't really just turn up. It takes a long time to build that structure up, and you can't, I don't think, just appear one day and go, I'm a gaffer. I think it's almost like you're promoted to it. A bit like a football manager in a way. You have to, you know, you've played the games, you've done all that stuff, and then you end up, you understand it, so therefore you can, you know, and you're the bridge between the crew and the DOP and the production, etc. So, you know, that takes a lot of what's the word, you know, experience really of doing that every day and every year, you know.
I mean, saying that often, but people will get, or say a younger DP will get a more experienced gaffer to come and for the experience, you know, because they want somebody to come and do, you know, I guess Chloe, that might be your situation where you've done, you know, and that is often what people do. Is that worked for you so far?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think almost all the gaffers I've worked with, I guess, apart from the wonderful guy in the Dominican Republic, who, you know, wasn't the most experienced guy that I met, but I just, like Julian was saying, we just got on. I knew that we were gonna, you know, and we're still in touch now. I knew that when I talked to him about films, he was really excited, and I guess I taught him stuff, but he just supported me because of the way he dealt with everything. And, you know, the light and the weather and everything there was pretty intense. But otherwise, it's always been, apart from music videos, it's always been gaffers who are way more experienced than me. And that's really nice. You just, because I can say, I want this sort of light and I want this sort of feeling, but I'm not sure what I might, you know, what I might use to get that. And they can make suggestions. And I've learned a lot about new units that way, rather than, you know, you can read in BSC magazine or ASC and a BSC show and all of that stuff, but actually having a gaffer who says, I use this on a previous job and it works really well and it might be quite good for this bit. you know, this location or this thing that you're imagining, but you don't know what to do. So yeah, I guess in a way, gaffers have taught me how to light more than even film school in a way.
Well, yeah,
I think it's similar. It's similar as well when I work with DOPs who are very experienced. I kind of, you know, there's obviously an slight out of balance of experience, and of course you then learn from them, and that's a healthy thing, I think, as well. It's just that you can, you know, it's a two-way street, I guess.
And I found that coming up because I started as a Sparks and I came up through the ranks was you got to work with different gaffers and you learned little bits off each of them. And then as you get brought up through when you're best boy and then you're doing rig and gaffer and then you get on to doing your own. So if you have little bits of all of theirs, you take it with you and you use it for your benefit.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing is a learning experience. I think we're always learning, and I think that's nobody knows everything, and nobody can make these things.
I know
on
somebody
their
who
own,
thinks
so
they do.
Yeah. Well, I think we all know somebody like that.
Yeah,
maybe.
right, yeah.
Very good. Now then, this is something I noticed that Paul got credited as a second unit DP on Danish Girl. There's probably a story behind that, but is that an inevitable thing with gaffers as well? Is that do a lot of them go on to be DPs? Is that a natural progression, do you think?
I think in the US, definitely. That is, as Julian says, that is the route. Gaffers become DPs. It doesn't seem to happen in the UK so much. I mean, there's been a few, not many that I know of, but I know that there's certainly a handful of guys. Natural progression, I don't know. Some guys may not want to do it. Some guys, you know, may want to go that route of becoming a DP. I mean, I don't know how that credit happened. I've got to be really honest. I still don't know to this day, and that is honesty. But
it looks like Danny knows what the story behind that is.
Oh, Danny probably knows. He's the man to ask. But
no, the last day or two on the Danish Girl was in Norway, and I couldn't do it. So I suggested Paul go and do it, and for some reason they took him. I don't know what he did, but
obviously it worked.
It worked fine. Yeah.
But what you will probably notice, that's the only one. That's the only second unit DOP credit that I've got.
Right.
So it's not a flourishing career.
Okay, cool. So something else that I noticed just looking through everyone's snooping through everyone's IMDb's was Ben in particular. You A-camera operate almost on every show that you do, is that right?
Yeah, and everything, to be honest, yeah.
Right.
On some of the films I just haven't got round to crediting myself, but you know,
right.
Never did it for me.
Or sometimes you don't get given it, do you? That's the.
Well, no, it's been on most of them, but I you know, I started at art college, and I was a gaffer for 5 years, commercials and music videos. Didn't do any movies or TV or anything, but and I always operated everything on commercials and music videos, everything. So I just wanted to carry that on. And then I did learn. It was a big learning curve going into narrative drama and stuff. But I worked with a really great director who helped me out at the beginning in TV dramas. And I just carried on. And I just prefer it that way. I prefer operating myself. And I just feel as I can drive the shoot. It's hard work. Really, and it doesn't get easier. Actually, it's not as though you can get to a point where you can get it. It's just solid hard work. Sooner or later, my knees will give way. But I mean, I just have to operate. Really, I like it. I enjoy it. I always have other operators with me because 9 times out of 10 on a film, you've got 2 cameras. So that's
how does that affect your relationship with the gaffer? And obviously, the gaffers can all answer to this. Really, is how useful is that? Because obviously that your time is split between, you're up front, and how does everyone negotiate that focus? Or because it kind of ups the a bit of the reliance on the gaffer even more because you're maybe watching monitors and stuff.
I just always, you always have to be really well planned. So you've got a really good plan for every single location, obviously all the studio stuff. So and you've got to have a plan B as well, and it's really tricky because you just don't want the gaff to ever leave your side, because you just can't, you know. It's like, don't go to the toilet, please don't go to the toilet, just can't. I know it's good, I know you're going to need to, just don't, please. I mean, now I use headsets, so at least I can be in contact with them all the time, so
whether they like it or not.
Yeah, we love it.
Who gave him a headset?
It's yeah. It's
Fair enough, give him a walkie-talkie.
You'll love it. But it's tough, but I just enjoy operating. I love operating. I love composing pictures. You know, when I'm not shooting films or television or whatever, commercials, I'm out taking photographs. That's what I do. So there are some great opera, but I just a bit of a control freak. I'm sorry. I just love to, I have to be in control, and you have to split your time because the director has a little bit less time, but I just try to motivate directors to come and stand near me rather than watching on a video village, because I want them to be a part of what I see the actor doing in those final moments. And some do, and some, but you know, they can see it, you know, but the relationship with the gaffer makes it a little bit more difficult because you've just got so much work to do, and it's tough. I enjoy it, you know. I enjoy it.
I think it's a double-edged sword. I quite like it because it allows me to do more lighting in a way, and you don't. But it depends who the cameraman is, obviously.
Yeah.
Who, you know. But I think for the director of photography, it's actually very useful to operate because they're the person that you know, it's flowing through them as such, and if you can then trust your gaffer to do the rest of it, then that's great. But
you know, at the end of the day, you've been discussing the look of the film with the director for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever. So it just feels natural. That's what you do, and you built that really because you have to build a relationship with the director, otherwise there's no point being there. So it just makes sense. And with the gaffer, you've got to have somebody who's just really on it with you, and you want somebody to have a sense of humor. So because you've got to spend, because you don't want your gaffer to be wandering off, you want them to be there with you. So you want to be there with somebody you get on with, you know. Sure. I get on with Barry, and I get on with all of them. So you know.
And I never go to the toilet.
No, he's had a special thing fitted, so he's not allowed. He's not allowed. Chloe, do you operate principle?
I offer the opposite, which is
right. Sorry, go on.
I always like working with operators.
Right.
And I think it's partly that as scales get bigger. I mean, if I can operate a camera, I'd love it, but it's never the A camera. And I think the dialogue you have with the director, which is ongoing, inevitably during takes, between takes, whenever you can grab it, that kind of creates things and pushes things forward in a way that, if you're on, if you're watching 4 monitors with 4 different cameras, I think you can't have an overview. And in a way, like the last thing I did, we had 3 weeks of 8 cameras, and to kind of manage that, I think it would have, I
mean, it's a really good point, Danny, because if that was the case, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't operate. I would just, because it's unmanageable. I mean, I'm only, maybe sometimes you get an extra couple of cameras, so maybe 3 or whatever, and then you just get operators that you can rely on. But I can just about cope with watching what the B camera's doing, and I've tried going, well, okay, I've done it before. I've just tried not to demarcate the cameras, so you don't go A and B, and I just call ourselves X and Y. So we're more the same. Do you see what I mean? But it's always the same thing with 2 cameras. If you're not careful, they get stuck together, or 3, they get stuck, and they're not moving, and they're not. It doesn't feel as though you're doing which is the camera that's authoring the shot of the scene. So.
I mean, I did try on Florence Foster Jenkins, the way we did it. I was doing the B camera, and Ian Mackay was doing A camera, and we fed his image into my eyepiece, so I could flip between A and B while we're turning over and operate. But on several occasions, I kept thinking I'd left the wrong. What I thought was my camera, and it was his camera, and I was completely did my head in.
Yeah, no, I've done that before. I've had the B camera on a little monitor on the top of the camera, and I always use the eyepiece for that. So every now I look up, and I look in, that's not the image, and then I get confused. And so that doesn't really work. But you know, if you have a good B camera operator, it's fine.
For sure.
You just have to do it, because I can't. I struggle not operating, you know. But you know, there are some great. Trust me, there's some great. As you all know, there's some great operators out there, and they're great collaborators. And I'll always work with operators, so I'm not just trying to hog the limelight. I'm doing it because I love doing it. I struggle not being behind the camera, you know.
Of course. Chloe, you said you operate mostly, do you?
Yeah, I've always operated a camera on everything I've done, actually. But I think, you know, I'm working on much smaller budget things than these guys. So I haven't had the opportunity necessarily to have an operator for a cam. And I guess when asked by production, or do you operate? I say yes. They think, okay, just one fee, then great. You know, we're not going to push it. I did meet for something earlier this year, which I guess I would have been shooting now. Where they were saying, "You sure? Would you have an operator for ACAM?" And I'm a bit like Ben. I love it. You know, I love being able to react to what the actors are doing. I love being able to frame for my lighting and light for my framing. I love to be able to. I'm a bit of a control freak as well. And again, I think the same as what Ben was saying. You spend so long in prep with a director, and you're breaking down a script, and you're looking at images together, and maybe you're watching films, and you're talking about music and art and all of this stuff. And you have a relationship with the actors, and then an operator comes in. How can you possibly expect them to be able to know everything you've been talking about for the last however many weeks? And if you've got an amazing relationship with somebody, I've had, you know, brilliant B cam ops or steady cam ops who do slot in and have great suggestions. But I don't know. I think mostly I just really enjoy it. You know, it's fun. Operating's fun.
How does that inform your relationship with the gaffer? I guess it's all you've known, isn't it?
It's all I've known, but I think what's really nice, you know, mostly I've had two cameras on most things. So it's really nice having a gaffer watching the monitors and saying, you know, that looks a little bit hot on B cam, or you need a little bit of a tickle in the background there. Do you want me to put something in? Whatever it is, like, you know, it's nice to have another pair of eyes on it. You have to trust, but then you have to trust B cam op to also say, is this all right? You know.
John, how is that for you? I mean, do you tend to sit by the DP, or have you do you sit in a DIT tent, or is it a different setup for you?
It all depends, really. It depends on how big the budget is and what's available. If there's recce's to do whilst we're shooting and stuff like that. But Chloe's really good in the fact that she will let you just give your ideas, and she's also very quick at saying yes and no very quickly as well, which I love, because you haven't got time to dilly-dally about, as they say. But yeah, so that's a quality that she has as well. So yeah, but yeah, it does depend on what the situation is, and also introducing. I mean, I like to introduce. I always have a really good electrician on the floor, and then introduce them very slowly to the DP, and that gives me time, if they like that situation. That means that I can then go off and prep and etc. only if they're comfortable. But Chloe was very accommodating, and that's helpful.
So with the future in mind, because that's all we've got right now, is practices that were well, we've talked about how things have changed, but how is everybody in terms of technology with lighting? I mean, everyone was going LED, and we were moving towards some degree of green, sustainable power sources. Anyway, how does, coming out of the situation we're in, how does everybody feel about that movement? I mean, it feels like there's a stasis in development right now. You know, nobody's spending any money. But where do you think we're going with technology, and what have you been using that feels progressive like that? I mean, we've all been using LEDs. Julian, what's your outlook on the future
I don't know.
of technology?
I guess it's like anything. I think it depends what No, but what you know, we on Rebecca we use a lot of wireless stuff, and it was really nice. But then also you use, you know, I think mixing it up really. I don't think it's a it doesn't solve everything. It just solves certain things, and that's a good thing. But I don't think you should rely on it exclusively. I mean, using tungsten, big tungsten lights or HMIs is still fantastic. It's not you can't, you know, really replicate those with modern technology at the moment. But I think, you know, we on Rebecca use a lot of wireless LED stuff, and it was fantastic. I mean, it saved, especially on a location where you couldn't rig anything or, you know, put wires through windows and stuff like that. It was a godsend. And I think that's, but you know, like anything, if you're cooking a meal, you're going to use your favorite pans or whatever, and that's what you do. But if there's something that can help it along, then why not? Yeah. I mean, you're not going to be whisking everything by hand. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of a labor-saving device as much as anything else. But I don't think it should be used exclusively. I think it's depending on the thing that you're doing.
Now, as much as there's a lot
I must
of new
admit, I
stuff
love it actually.
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't have done a lot of that stuff. I don't think, and these days the speed of production, you can't.
Yeah,
that sort of stuff is essential. Plus, also then control, because then you've got
yes,
you know, all the amount of rapid control. Paul, how are you embracing that new technology?
I took a bit of convincing when LED came into the mainstream, but now I like it a lot. There's certain units that I use, and there's units out there that I won't use, even within LED. But again, for me, nothing replaces Fresnel light when you light people. I mean, okay, when a light's going through a frame, who knows what it is? But tungsten Fresnel light, I don't think will be replaced, the quality of it, by LED. But all the different things that it does, yeah, there's absolutely a place for it. And the green power side of it is very good. You're running a lot less cabling and generation and power. You can use batteries on a lot of it, which is helpful as well. But yeah,
and gels as well. You know, there's less gel use as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, colors, all that stuff. But with digital photography, it brings its own problems with windows, exteriors, more control.
Yeah,
more control required than ever, rather than lighting a lot of the time now. But yeah, I'm convinced by LED.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's I've got to open up my camera a bit. Sorry. It's more so it's the same as camera really, is that there's a lot, you know, stuff moves quickly. We've got big sensors and all sorts of exciting and small stabilized heads. There's all sorts of exciting things, but none of those things are fixing everything. It doesn't make all of the what's gone before disappear, does it? So no, I think you're right.
Just shifts it around.
They just happen to be, we're just very lucky to have new tools in the kit. I mean, we could look at an example. How about this? Danny, you and Paul did a job last year, I believe, where you used an awful lot of LED stage moving lights. Is that right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us anything about that? Are you not allowed to tell us?
No, that was a film called Eurovision, and we had to replicate the Eurovision stage from the real competition, and then build half of the stage and a set to then drop into what were our wides that we'd done at the kind of real event. And it was, it was a big old set stage at Leavesden, and something like that, it was only doable because of the technology. We had, like, Paul can give you the numbers. I'll let Paul can take it. It is kind of mind-boggling what we could actually do and the speed we could do stuff.
Right. I mean, I've talked to you about this, Paul, before, is that a lot of that technology is being led by stage stuff, isn't it? By rock and roll. Is a lot of the developments in LED lighting is and movers and stuff comes from them.
No question. The kind of live kind of concert event lighting is, I would say, probably a year or two ahead of us.
Right.
If you go and see Plaza, the lights that they have on show, some of them are fantastic, which we take a lead from in ours. You're showing some pictures, Laurie, yeah?
I am showing some pictures. How good is that?
That's some of the 850 moving lights that were on the set.
Wow.
Uh,
And how did it, obviously you took your cues from, because I know you shot or you did some work at the actual show, right? So it was at the Eurovision show, and then you replicated a version of that at Leavesden.
yeah, but these were all new songs, so they were all time coded and designed for our set.
Right.
So
And is that your seat there?
That's the 3 grand MAs to run it.
Wow, that's a massive setup. But was it just but obviously you had to tailor some of that to shooting. So there was stop levels, and were there any flicker problems, and were there, or did you have key lights, or did you just kind of work just with whatever the show lights were?
It was a mixture. I mean, I think one of the things basically we had to balance it all. I think we shot it all at 5,000 K color temperature, just because the majority of all that gear is daylight balanced rather than tungsten. So, and then we had loads of sky panels on the roof of the set. But I think we want the approach we took was to kind of, this part of the film was to shoot it as if it were the real event. And then I think to not have kind of gone down that road would have kind of opened a can of worms, because you still have to shoot it, and the schedule that dictates that you got to get a chunk of work done every day. So to do it any other way would have been, I think, really tricky.
That looks like a big old setup. How long were you in studio for that for?
That was a 6 weeks to rig it.
6 week rig.
Yeah, we shot it for 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, one of the things I remember Paul being quite hardcore about it with production was because we'd inevitably that just because the schedule was being built while we were shooting, so we had to be quite bolshy about having time to be in the set with the performers, with the lighting, and the cameras sometimes, to just rehearse as much as we could before we actually shot it, because so that became a bit just finding the time to do that on a weekly basis was a bit tricky. Right.
Let's look at some other examples of stuff that Ben and Barry did in Ireland when they did some of. Let's find this one here. Look at that. It's all very swizzy. Oh, let's get that out of the way. Oh, and let's go full screen. Hang on a sec. So tell us a bit about this. What was it? What are you up to here, Ben?
Well, this I don't know if it's still there. This is the old Guinness factory. Is it still there, Barry?
Yes, I would say so. I haven't been in it since then. I don't know if they still use it. But
pretty amazing location. It's a little bit tricky to light, but the thing about this film was it's a period film about Dickens set in 1842, and these are all stills that I took. They're not pictures from the film at all, but this was just a location. So I just wanted to make it a little bit slightly different than just a lot of films that were, or films that I had done before the same period, when it was just maybe it had the similar kind of look, and I tried to do something different. For right or wrong, I tried to do something different with this, and sometimes it worked really, really well, and it was just good to be in a different place than London, shooting this kind of thing with a different crew and there's a screenshot, one of these pictures which I put in. If you fast forward, it's a wider shot of the graveyard. Actually, stay on that one a sec. I couldn't find a picture of Barry. I thought that was Barry, not this one. I thought that was Barry, but I don't think it is.
It doesn't look like Barry.
I don't know.
Is that all you've got? Is that your only memento?
I do have one on my house anyway. But there's a wide shot of the graveyard yard. I mean, this was the back lot at Ard. That was the back lot at Ardmore. There's one more still.
Oh no, there isn't. Hang on a sec.
Or maybe I just didn't put it in. Oh, anyway, maybe go back to the girl against the window, because there's an interesting story about that. The girl against the window. Okay, so they didn't have a VFX budget of any real note. So, and then this girl, it just comes as an apparition. She comes as she just comes in and out. She's like one of the ghosts in A Christmas Carol, but she isn't a ghost. And we had to try and create this effect, and it's just really old school, because it's basically, I think, 2 or 3 electricians with 10Ks outside that window, and there's something inside as well. And I put them on little skateboard dollies on tracks and just go backwards and forwards, and a load of wind through the. And it was just, we didn't. And this set was a beautiful set, great production designer, in a bread factory in Dublin. Nothing glamorous about it at all. And Barry's electricians just running up and down for hours with like 10Ks and just spinning them around. It was just like we'd just left, 2 weeks out of film school. And it's weird, because that was only a couple of years ago. Sometimes things just don't change. But I actually just, I love that. I think it was just great. And it was, no VFX at all. And it's a bit of a slightly cheap effect, I suppose, but I thought it worked quite well. Do you remember that, Barry?
I do. I have a video of it somewhere on a phone, because Dad was sitting on an apple box with the dolly in front of him, just swinging it backwards and forwards. There was one of the lads just spinning the lamps around.
Yeah. But anyway, just great locations, and I mean, I think a lot of it was still quite old school lighting. I mean, this was what, 3 or 4 years ago, maybe. We didn't have any LEDs on this. I mean, I like LEDs, but if it's predominant, if you've got a lot of tungsten sets, I just don't trust the tungsten setting on the LEDs. It just doesn't look the same as Paul was saying. I hope that LEDs don't, or maybe they'll get better, but they don't take over tungsten Fresnels, because the quality of that light, you just can't, I don't know how you replicate that. The daylight side's fine. But if somebody said I had to shoot a whole film with LEDs, fine, I could do it, of course I could. But it's not my preference. This film was all shot with tungsten Fresnels and HMIs. Not even, I don't even think we had any Kina flows on it. It's just old school.
Reefers and dados.
And some data, lots of dados. Many dados you can get hold of.
Everyone loves dado. Who doesn't love dados?
I know, they're amazing. So as Paul said, I'm a little unsure of the tungsten setting, but then, on LEDs, and I wish they kind of perfect that. But
it's getting better all the time, isn't it? And I think you're right. Even some of the gel packs, I think sometimes it can, if you get the settings wrong, sometimes they can mismatch ever so slightly. But all that stuff, I think, is getting better all the time. Julian, we had quite a lot of experience of that on what were we using? It was those Gemini light panels, wasn't it? The tuber ones.
Gemini light panels, and then the stereos. And we didn't use a huge amount of HMIs actually, because we felt that the windows were so big you couldn't actually light through them properly. I thought it was quite nice. It's just, I think, like anything, it's just finding a balance. And I love tungsten. I think it's great, but also then you can't bring a Quartadino into a National Trust building. So it's all those things. It's the practicality of things as well. So it's finding the way through it, I think.
That was definitely a thing. Heritage houses, and convincing them that we had no distribution and no heat, because that's the thing, isn't it? Yes.
And everything had to be approved for heat and all that stuff. It's really difficult.
Because the first thing people would think, as soon as you say you want to start rigging stuff, is they think it's hot and heavy, and so it doesn't have to be, does it, these days?
I think also that it's about flavors, and it's how you disguise things as well. Like, I don't like fluorescents particularly, but you can use them correctly, and you can disguise them to work to your benefit. But it's always a payoff, So.
I'm just gonna grab some of your images, Julian, if you don't mind. Just gonna open these up and have a quiz of these. These are.
It's all my own work.
All your own work.
All my own work.
Hang on, here we go. Let's go full screen with this. Oh, everything is going very slowly. I apologize. Here we go. It's all very slick. It's such a, we're doing a show right here.
Everybody's
folks.
logged on after they're walking their dogs.
Yeah, here we go. It's happening right here. Okay. What we got here? Crumbs. Okay, that's a big old softbox. What was that made out of?
That was it was 96 Parkans, and then I think 60 blondes in the centre.
Well, there you go. There's
And
no
that-
LED in that softbox.
No, we did very little LED on that show at all. Actually, it was all tungsten because it was that look we're looking for, and we actually used a lot of 10K big eyes, and it was all tungsten actually. Very little LED. Even all the small bulbs we hid around places were tungsten, which is a
Well, I
nightmare.
guess
because
that's
obviously you've got-
2014 because it was ever so slightly before.
Yes, it was
wasn't
just
a
on the
lot of
cusp,
LED
you know.
around.
Yeah, certainly not an amount of sky panels. Again, that was there was some LED.
The dados, there's dados.
We built, yes, there's dados, and we built our own big fat LED tubes, which we could just magnetize, so we could just rig them up into the scene very quickly. Again, you've got 12 main cast members in a cupboard. You know, it's very difficult with two 65mm cameras, so hiding stuff was virtually impossible. You know?
Yeah.
So light and quick was the thing, which I think with tungsten with 2K 650s and things like that was struggle. That was all sky panels. And then we stuck a balloon in, which we actually took out because it was too wasn't necessary. And the sky panels, you could have never done that with tungsten actually, because the levels of light we were using were so low and color changing and things. I think you wouldn't have been able to do it with a traditional lighting. Big old crane, that
is a big old crane. So it's far too big.
It's massive. I was shocked when I saw it. I was like, wow, that's huge. But we needed the reach because we couldn't put it in the location itself.
Is that the same rig, that one?
Yeah, just the crane so far away you can't see it.
I mean, yes, I don't know how we can do stuff like that with that amount of control anyway. Well, I don't know without sky panels these days and 360s and stuff. They've become, Barry, you've got an awful lot of sky panels on your built sets. Is that right?
An awful lot. Serious amount. But I agree with the guys. Like they're great once you get down to the low levels, and they're brilliant for doing that you can dim them down and there's no shift, there's no changing them. But give me 20Ks any day. Just I think the quality of the light's just stunning out of it. And there isn't an LED lamp that's got close to it. We tested the Chroma Cube Roots at the start, and they're close to the Wendy's, but I just don't think the LEDs have got to the point of 20Ks or 10Ks even.
No.
Quality out of them.
I think there's a lot of people spending a lot of time on color temperature, CRI, and all that, which is great. Around camera, they're really good. But when you want big grunt, big push, you can't beat the tungsten or HMIs.
Yeah.
Paul, you found, weren't you looking at a big LED head that had a lot of output?
Yeah, it was one that Warner Brothers had it.
Is it a Mal Richardson one?
No, it was Cinemills made it. It was
about 6K. Was it about 6K?
It was like a 6K output, but they only had it in daylight.
Yeah.
And we were doing The Conjuring 2 at the time.
Yeah.
And I think I took it out twice, but we never used it because it was only daylight. But the output was fantastic. But again, you put a frame in front of it, it's a 6K. You know, it didn't do anything. If it was bi-colour, it would have been great. But again, making it bi-colour, you lose the output. So
yes,
I think that's the holy grail actually of lighting, is that finding a big lens light that you can screw in is really difficult. Well, that was that was shot basically with one bulb, which is by Lily's feet, and then we had a couple of mold beams through the top windows, and that was it.
Just a couple of mold beams.
Yeah, some 10K.
So these are all pictures. Sorry, go on.
Say again, sorry, Laurie, you broke up.
No, sorry, go on. I was just going to say these are all. Go on.
Well, no, this is all tungsten again. Space lights through the top and Parkans actually through the grid up above with some quarter CTS gel fab, and then all that stuff on the rig itself was festoons, and we used a light which I love actually, which is a Deca source, which you can break down into individual bulbs. but super hot and very kind of boisterous to use. That was we had like 1,000 channels of sky pan 1,000 par cans on that rig alone, I think.
Rock and roll.
It was Cinderella.
Amazing. Did you use any LED? That must be LED in that, right?
We had over 1,000 channels of LED just in that room, I think. And then we used an 18K on a max mover above the set, and it was beautiful actually. Darius is very talented. He just his levels of light that he uses just are amazing and very subtle, really good, really nice.
High or low? Low.
Well, no, just not creating really like shooting 3 cameras, so you just have to be quick. So you just use one big light, and and shooting on high def, high digital is such it just allows a lot of space and freedom actually for actors and things, which I like very much. There's not turnaround times as well. It's much easier.
Well, this is it. I mean, that's a whole other panel for lighting a 360 set, which we're going to have to come back to. I've got a last couple of questions. One is,
why do gaffers need to go to toilets?
Why do gaffers need to go to toilet? No, it's actually one from Stephen Murphy of BSC, who put together some of these questions for us. You've got 10 minutes left in the day, and you've got one last setup to do. You've got to compromise the lighting, or you have to go to the toilet. Which one do you do? No. So do you compromise the direction of your key light or the quality of the light? And I said, he asked me for the answer, and I said, well, surely it is really difficult. But
you turn all the actors to face the key light if it's behind them.
Exactly, yeah. Well, I said, if you've got the direction of light right, I think the quality of light might have to give away a little bit. But I guess it's going to come down to what the scene is, and it's how long is a piece of string, isn't it? I guess
too many factors, isn't it?
What would I think we'll just go to these questions here. Sorry, there is a couple of questions just in here. Let me just grab couple of these before we wrap it out. There's a question specifically for Danny and Paul. Hang on. It's kind of about framing, really. I mean, about the King. It's a question about the King's Speech and about the framing. I mean, how much was that? Which I think is interesting in itself. How much of that was built? Because it felt like a lot of those interiors were built. How and were they built? And is that how they were lit? They were obviously studios.
No, basically. I mean, we didn't build very much. It was mostly location, and we just. I think the big location where a lot of the consultations took place, we had to rig that for day and for night. I know we were shooting November, December, so it was about maintaining continuity of light and all that sort of thing. So, I mean, Paul might remember, but did we build many sets? A couple of little
sets? Very small sets. It was all at 33 Portland Place and Lancaster House. The old Regal buildings that we always go to, but we've done a small bit at Elstree, but not very much on that, so mainly location. And it was, as you say, we had to have constant daylight into the later hours of the day, so we just built white tents on the roof at Portland Place so we could do the daylight scenes or go to night whenever we fancied.
Well, that's the bit, you've made it your own studio, but that's the thing, isn't it? What you gain with the location, we did a lot on Rebecca, is what you gain with the location is that you struggle with for control, and we ended up on some of these big heritage houses, around various houses around the country. We actually made studios. We built whole blackout tents, and actually they had green screens and blue screens and various in them. So we just basically maintained all of that control. There's no other way of doing it. I think that's the practicality of that sort of stuff. But it costs money, doesn't it?
And time.
And time, and the people to do it. So I guess it gets all down to budget. I think that's almost all of the questions, really. Well, I think there's not much more to say. I mean, we could go on, keep going for hours and hours, and I appreciate you all hanging around various with that amazing slick conjuring of pictures. I appreciate your patience. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been really amazing. It's lovely to see all your faces. I hope you're all staying safe and well. Yeah, thank you for joining me, and thank you to everybody watching. Join us next time where we will we'll find something else to talk about. But thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laurie.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh.